This story is about, you would like to have a nice long list of excuses ready. Perhaps you can blame the refs or the league or the weather or something a little more creative. You would like to think if the teams met on the same field in 1 week that the results would go the other direction. You would like all of that to be true. But, honestly, 3 hours of football at the Death Star on Sunday night seemed to reveal some completely different findings. These are two football teams that are going in completely different directions right now, and the difference between the two does not appear to be terribly close. The Cowboys were stomped on Sunday night. There is really no nice way to put it. After somehow finding themselves in the lead at the intermission, the Eagles decided that the game was over by putting the ball in the end zone on 3 consecutive drives to start the second half, with drives totaling 75, 90, and 85 yards. They never got the ball in a better position than their own 25-yard line and ran 24 plays right down the Cowboys' throats to the tune of 250 yards, 10.4 yards per snap during that time. The Cowboys responded to that challenge to a fireworks show with a punt, another punt, and finally a sack fumble that was returned for a 4th Eagles touchdown of the second half. And like that, it was over. The Cowboys were humbled defensively in Atlanta the week before. This is likely an appropriate time to point out that the absences of Ezekiel Elliott and Tyron Smith have been felt at a more severe level than this author had hoped. The belief that the next man up could at least keep the Cowboys' offense from looking like an expansion team's first try at playing football appears to have vanished into mid-air. They can't move the ball at all. Against Atlanta, they had a season-low in yardage 233 yards and in yards per snap 3.94. They had a week to work on it and were returning home to take on a divisional rival. How would they do? Well, against Philadelphia, they again set a season-low in yardage 225 yards and in yards per snap 3.57. Instead of giving up 8 sacks and 2 turnovers, they decided to get a little more creatively symmetrical and go with 4 sacks and 4 turnovers. It would be disingenuous to avoid talking about the QB position in this game, because as the night went along, it was painfully clear that the team with the QB who performed at a higher level was going to win the game. Carson Wentz did not play the best game of his career or even his season or his month. The fact is that Wentz is everything the Eagles could have dreamed halfway through his second season and more. He is exactly what the Cowboys thought when they examined him so carefully at the Senior Bowl in January of 2016 when they were so heavily linked to him. They loved him, we heard. They would take him if he fell to number 4, we heard. But, they didn't love him enough to trade up to get him. They still had Tony Romo, and the price to move from number 4 to number 2 would be too steep, anyway. They would take the running back, and you will see why soon enough. Well, the Eagles felt they should trade up for him. They felt so strongly, they traded up twice to go get him. First, they pulled the trigger to move from number 13 to number 8 in the first round with the Miami Dolphins on March 9 of 2016 in a trade that also moved 2 Chip Kelly guys, Kiko Alonso and Byron Maxwell, to South Florida. Then, on April 20, they pulled the trigger to jump in front of Dallas, too. They sent number 8 and 4 other picks, including their 2017 first-rounder, the pick that ended up being Deshaun Watson, to Cleveland to go get Carson Wentz at number 2. They had to know that they were giving up so much to get him that perhaps there would be nobody left to play with him. Luckily, they were able to sell off some other assets from the Chip Kelly reign, the amazing Sam Bradford heist, to salvage picks, and decided to get very aggressive in the market. They also had to know that jumping the Cowboys to get Wentz was a great way to make sure that he is playing for you rather than against you when those two rivals butt heads for the next decade or so. The Cowboys stood pat. They had their guy, too. They would get their QB of the future later. Romo would be fine for years, anyway. You know the story from there. They wanted Paxton Lynch and Connor Cook and ended up with Doc, who then had Romo break in front of him and went on to roll right through his first 24 games at a very high level before the Elliott suspension began. But, since it has happened 2 weeks ago, the Cowboys have scored 1 touchdown in the 23 offensive drives they have recorded since. 1. 2 games and 1 touchdown. That isn't he going to compete well against the NFC team that was in last year's Super Bowl and perhaps the NFC team that is headed to this year's Super Bowl. Prescott and the offense couldn't take advantage of their chances. Both QBs had a rough first half, but when Wentz got going, Prescott and his receivers had no ones.